Good morning to members of the media. Good morning to the people
was, I believe, it raised many questions, and so we asked for some answers. It is evident now from the report that Minister Cummings and companies linked to him are under police investigation, because it is reported in the media, and I am repeating what I heard in the media reports and what I read in the newspaper, that the Venture Credit Union has refused to answer questions because they are, in fact, dealing with and have been dealing with the police. So you have here now companies linked to a government minister, companies which he says he has relinquished all ties with, but that he was previously associated with, under investigation by the police. We revealed that the contracts awarded to this company for emergency works last year, those checks were being deposited directly into a personal account. The explanation that came forward at that point in time was that because a company cannot be a member of a credit union, the minister took personal financing as a member of the credit union, which was used by the family companies in order to fund their work and the work that they needed, capital or whatever they needed to take by these contracts. And what they had done is assign contracts to Venture. Now, we've been asking the question about whether or not this is a standard practice where contracts not yet even awarded to a company can be taken as an assignment and as some sort of security in relation to a loan. Because a $14.5 million loan given to a member, an individual, and as an assignment, companies, which he says he relinquished ties from now, are assigning the proceeds of contracts to the credit union and are being sent in to, the checks are being made out directly to the credit union. That to me raises a lot of questions. All in all, if you look at the reports being put out there through the media and what we exposed last year and the questions that we have been asking, it is definitely to us evident that the regulators of the credit union sector need to get involved here and need to ask some questions. I cannot understand how it is that a credit union could be facilitating some of these things. And what has been put out there into the media is certainly that there were not even all of the approvals in place and that there may have been a breach of their own procedures in order to facilitate some of these transactions. That in itself is certainly something that ought to be investigated. The critical issue here, however, is the fact that the Commissioner for Cooperative Development sits within the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service. And the minister there is, of course, Minister Foster Cummings. This particular unit was removed from the Ministry of Labour, where it was previously placed, and put directly under the purview of Minister Cummings. So how can we expect there to be any proper exercise of regulatory authority by this Commissioner of Cooperative Development and his office when in fact they sit directly below the minister, who is the subject and whose family companies are the subject of this of this entire scandal that is being played out in the media? I say today that if everything that is said here today, everything that is said in the media, and everything that has come to light and come to the attention of the Prime Minister, if it is not enough for him to remove Foster Cummings from his cabinet, well, at a minimum, he ought to remove the office of the Commissioner for Cooperative Development from the purview of Minister Cummings and reassign that portfolio to another ministry so that at least we can see that there would be some effort being made to have independent of this particular minister, that they can then do their work and look at what is happening at Venture Credit Union. We raise these questions today not just because it is a government minister, but on behalf of all of the members of this credit union. Because when it is reported in the media that a credit union, who I think they are one of the larger credit unions, may be breaching their own rules, and approvals may not be obtained in order to facilitate a particular transaction and so on, it is worrying to all of its members. And therefore, we think that this is certainly enough information for us to make a call of this nature. The explanations being given about contracts being assigned and loans being obtained and so on prior to Minister Cummings becoming a minister, to me, really does not hold much weight, because the fact of the matter is that at the time Minister Cummings was a government senator, during this period of time, he was also a high-ranking member of the People's National Movement, which was in power. And so questions must be asked, and it must be raised in the minds of the members of this credit union and others, whether there was any sort of influence, whether rules may have been bent, and whether there may have been an accommodation for the particular minister in order to facilitate this loan, and that may not be offered to other persons. There's a lot of information out there in terms of the reporting about the credit score that was relevant at this point in time, and concerns being raised over the steps being taken for the approvals. At a bare minimum, it is evident that the law which says that a company cannot be a member of a credit union, of a cooperative, or on by law, only an individual or another cooperative can be a member of a cooperative. So a smaller credit union, for example, can become a member of Venture Credit Union. A company cannot. But as a workaround, an individual in the person of Minister Foster Cummings has been obtaining financing, loan financing from the credit union in his personal name to finance the activities of companies. And that by itself shows that the law is being flexed, it is being manipulated, and it is being facilitated in relation to a government minister. I don't know if this is a practice that pertains to other persons, but as I said, the Commissioner of Cooperative Development ought to certainly have an investigation and determine what is taking place at Venture Credit Union, because it is not in anybody's interest to have the name of a financial institution being portrayed this way in the media, and their practices and the perhaps oversight or lack of supervision from their supervisory committee, from their credit committee and others within the organization being called into question. That type of publicity, which is coming to the light right now through these media reports, is not good for any financial institution. And the truth of the matter is that one has to question. We recall that we had serious issues. We had an entire commission of inquiry into the operations of a credit union. And if it is that credit unions are still perhaps lacking a certain amount of regulatory oversight, it is something that definitely must be drawn to the attention of the commissioner, and he must act upon it. Coming out of these news reports, we have actually received today a lot of information that would have been submitted, and this is a whole package of information of what Venture Credit Union would have had before them when they made certain decisions, and it is something that we intend to study very carefully. And in the future, we may, of course, wish to bring certain things to light, because we are seeing here where approvals might have been needed from even the commissioner in order for some of the securities and so on. And we intend to explore very in a great detail some of this information that we have received here. We intend to also look into the issue using the Freedom of Information Act about some of the practices and some of the approvals that may have been needed, and about communication between this credit union and the Commissioner for Cooperative Development, because we are in very great detail, and to do some further research. Now, on the topic of research, I have also been looking at a number of transactions and dealings, and all of this ties back into one specific theme, and that is the theme that this particular minister seems to have his hands involved in a lot of different areas through a number of corporate entities. You would recall that last year I made public a special branch report that was prepared in relation to this particular minister. And some of the concerns raised in that particular special branch report were the granting of contracts and a number of persons were interested, particularly because they said that contracts were being given to different companies. The names of those companies were called. And there was one company in particular that the minister in his response said was not his company, but that, you know, he was aware of who the company was. And in that special branch report, it was reported that there were concerns about the amount of that there were concerns about the number of contracts being awarded to these particular companies. The name of that company is in fact Clydon. And we started to look into this company by the name of Clydon that the minister said was not his company, and that was certainly not linked to him, except that he knew that they were doing work. Clydon is a company that was incorporated in November of 2015. That is just a few months after the PNM came to power in 2015. That is when Clydon came into being. The incorporator of this company was previously the secretary of one of the family companies belonging to Minister Foster Cummings. That is what we've been able to uncover. And I don't want to call those names, but certainly that person is there in the company records. That person is the director of the company. That person was the incorporator of this company just after the PNM came into power. Now, Darren, it's not there. Oh, sorry. Yes. Thanks. And to me, the links between this company and Minister Cummings and his companies, I don't know. I will leave it to the population. I'm here today with the documents, the company documents pulled from the company registry, and I will leave it to everyone to determine whether or not these are coincidences or whether there's a connection between this company and the particular minister. When Clydon applied to become a registered contractor with CPEP, for example, they had two references, Rivulet Investments and Pical Services Limited. Those are the companies that we know that Minister Cummings is a part of and that are still owned by his family, even though he has removed himself as a director and so on. This company called Clydon had absolutely no issued share capital until the year 2020. In 2021, there was a change of address. They were first incorporated at one particular address, and in 2021, they changed their address and they moved it to a suite number 2 Metro building in Couva. Rivulet Investment Group, which is a company owned by Minister Cummings and his family, and I think he previously held a position in that company, has its registered address as unit number 1, Metro building, Noel Street in Couva, from the years 2015 to 2020. So as soon as one moved out, one seemed to move in that same building. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. The person who incorporated this company called Clydon and who is a director in this company from 2006 was the secretary on record for Cummings and Associates, and lists her profession, because of course you're required to list your profession in these company documents, as executive assistants. So in 2015 now, when this company was formed in July, another company called Cummings and Associates changed its address to suite number 2 Metro building in Couva. And in 2015 of August, this individual ceased to hold office as the secretary of Cummings and Associates, and then incorporated Clydon, and eventually moved to the same address where Rivulet Investment Group and Cummings and Associates was previously located. As of September 2021, Cummings and Associates is the most recent company documents we could have gotten our hands on. Cummings and Associates is still at the same address. And in November 2021, that is the most recent documents we have for Clydon, they are at the same address as some of these other companies linked to Minister Cummings. What is the relevance of this? Through the Freedom of Information Act, we were able to ascertain, we asked about the number of contracts and so on given to different companies. And this is the response that I got from UDICOT here today, because I've been sending out a number of FOIA requests to all state companies so that I could look into the number of contracts being awarded to these companies based on what was raised in that special branch report that never got the attention that I think it deserved from the Prime Minister, because there were concerns raised by the police and it ought to be looked at. So I have been looking at it through utilizing the Freedom of Information Act. And it stood out to me here that the Clydon Enterprises Limited, a company formed in 2015 that had no issued share capital up until the year 2020, was paid. And the question that I asked was for a statement of all monies paid to Rivulet, Cummings and Associates, Clydon, Pical, and or in the personal names of Minister Cummings and his associates. And what I was able to discover is that Clydon was actually paid for the period of 2010 to 2022, $19 million. $19 million paid to a company called Clydon that is apparently sharing an office space with Cummings and Associates that was formed immediately after the People's National Movement took power in 2015 by someone who served as the secretary, the company secretary of one of Minister Cummings' companies prior to forming this company. Mere months before forming Clydon, this person, this individual, was still the secretary on record at one of Cummings and Associates. So I also asked, and this is the interesting part now, because you see, based on what transpired and what came to our knowledge of contracts being assigned and checks being made out by state companies directly in the name of Minister Cummings and being sent to Venture Credit Union, I asked for copies of the checks from Udicot for all the checks made out to these companies, including Clydon and Associates. And would you know that I will read the response that we got from Udicot. Udicot has refused. They have refused to disclose those checks. And listen to what they have said. They are claiming an exemption, saying that it will be unreasonable disclosure of personal information of individuals. But listen to who the individuals are that they are claiming for. In particular, the identities and signatures of officers authorized to execute documents related to financial transactions. So Udicot is saying, we cannot show you those checks that we cut to Clydon for the $19 million that they've been paid since, I assume, their existence in 2015 to present. They cannot show that to us because they don't want us to see the signatures of the people in Udicot who signed in the check. That is personal information. So I have taken them to court. I have filed a judicial review and that matter is pending because I believe that if there are companies so closely associated with a government minister and they have from 2015 when they were incorporated to now earned such a substantial amount of money from a state enterprise, and this is only one state enterprise. As I said, I have about 20-something freedom of information requests being sent out. We have a team working around the clock on all of these agencies, and we want to find out more. And we also want to know whether there may be more companies that are so closely linked to this minister. And of course, we are researching that. But they are refusing to tell us who the checks are going to. If the checks went to Clydon, tell us that that's where it went. They are alleging that it would be easy for fraud to take place if they were to disclose checks that show the signatures of the persons who execute those documents. And so we have to now look at that more seriously. I say this in the context of what I consider to be the most important revelation coming out of this particular article today. And that is the last paragraph of this article. And I want everybody to pay very close attention to it. And what it says here in this article, which I think was obtained through an insider, is that there is evidence that a check dated December 3rd, 2020 was made payable to Venture Credit Union from HDC in the sum of $369,000 for services done by Pical. So this is yet another company that is associated with Minister Cummings. I think it is now owned and controlled by his wife. And he previously would have had a position in that company. But this company is also receiving and doing work for HDC and they are being paid. But the check is being sent directly to Venture Credit Union for services done by Pical. And according to the source of funds declaration, $186,866.30 was paid to the loan facility, while the difference of $182,133.40 was placed in Minister Cummings' personal share account, contrary to what he told the Express. Now, that there is the absolute most critical thing coming out of this article here today, because it would suggest that a government minister who claims to have relinquished all ties with companies that are being awarded contracts from state enterprises is building his personal share capital in a credit union through the award of these contracts. The proceeds of these contracts, part of it is going into his personal account. This is contrary also to the explanation that he gave last year when I asked about the MTS checks being sent directly to Venture Credit Union. It was that the contracts were assigned, that Venture took an assignment, and therefore they were simply paying back this loan that was taken in his personal name and given to the for the use by these companies that were affiliated to him at the time. So again, I have to say, and there's so much information out there about the practices and what is taking place, because that is certainly a commingling of funds. We have rules and regulations that the regular average citizen has to abide by. The Financial Intelligence Unit has guidelines out there for all financial institutions, including credit unions, where you are supposed to do a certain amount of due diligence when it comes to companies and so on, and including companies owned or operated by close business associates of persons who are politically exposed persons. Minister Cummings is a PEP, as we call them, politically exposed person. And if this company called Clydon is so closely affiliated, I mean physically and otherwise, the person was previously working in one of your companies. They are sharing the same address. I think they even have the same accountant. And I will perhaps share the company documents with members of the media, so you can see it for yourself. They have the same accountant filling out their company registry documents. And they are so intertwined that the only two references this company could have when they apply to CPEP are two companies owned by Minister Cummings' family. And now Unicot is saying, well, we can't show you the checks. We can't show you where the checks are going. I leave it to you to make what you will make of that. The final thing I want to address is something that, again, based on the special branch report last year, we raised the issue of HDC properties being owned by Minister Cummings. And Minister Cummings responded saying the allegation that he had purchased lands from the HDC at Point Lisa, St. Couva is false. He said he owned a parcel of land at Balizé Street West, purchased from a private individual. My wife is the owner of a parcel of land at the corner of the Southern Main Road, Balizé Street East, Point Lisas, also purchased from a private individual. Our family home is located, so on, so on. He went on to say that, and all properties have been properly declared and all of that. So I was interested to find out about the properties, again, being purchased from private individuals. And so I sent a free number of information request to the HDC. I will perhaps share some of this information with members of the media, because I think it is quite interesting. The property was actually purchased from by a person by the name of Maria Salazar. This is a person who became the owner of this particular HDC property through the HDC. Now, Maria Salazar, at the time that she acquired this HDC property, was a director in one of Minister Cummings's companies as well. I believe it is Rivulet. So she became a director in Rivulet in 2016, and she purchased this property from the HDC at somewhere around the cost of $50,000. At the time, it was simply a parcel of land. So this parcel of land, when you purchase it from the HDC, as many people who own properties from the HDC would know, there's a requirement within 3 years that you build upon the structure. Ladies and gentlemen, and I understand sometimes that people, and of course I heard the minister's response saying that he's been advised and he has not done anything illegal and all of that. Whether something is illegal or whether it is a flexing of the rules and a breach of rules is certainly something, when it involves a government minister, that we pay attention to. And I think that we are required to always pay attention to these things, because it is a matter of concern when it comes to HDC properties. You see, we have a situation where there are hundreds and maybe thousands of people awaiting HDC housing, and people who have to abide by the rules when they purchase HDC homes, and they are not being perhaps allowed to exercise the amount of flexibility that other persons may be afforded. And so I think that is certainly a matter that we want to have raised here today. I want to show you what that HDC property looks like today. And I want to put the country on notice that we are certainly going to be asking questions about whether or not, and I'm just putting this out there and I'm asking the question, whether or not this building will one day be occupied, and whether it is already in the works to have this building occupied by a statutory authority. Are there plans to have this property rented by a statutory authority? And I will go through the history of how this came to be, how this building came to be in existence on an HDC property. What transpired is that when someone by the name of Maria Salazar, who was a director in Rivulet Investments Limited, purchased this property, and we have all of the deeds because we asked for disclosure of those deeds from the HDC. The property was purchased for the sum of roughly $50,000. $51,640.29. And the conditions attached to this property, it is a leasehold property, 999 years. The remainder, of course, for the 199 years goes to the person. That's all well and good. Some of the conditions that the person who is assigned this lease are required to abide by is that to erect on the demised lands within 3 years of the date a single private dwelling house in accordance with plans to be approved, and also to look and to, the other usual things, pay the rent reserved, etc., not to do anything that would breach the rules and so on that they have in our residential area. A single private dwelling house. Does this look like a single private dwelling house? Does it? I don't know. So this deed was executed in the year, and I will give you the exact dates, to be very clear, 29th of May, 2017, from the HDC to Maria Salazar. Became a director in 2016 in Rivulet. 2017, signed lease deed of assignment to acquire portion of land, which now looks like this, with this building on it. Subsequently, Maria Salazar applied to the HDC for permission to dispose of that particular property and indicated that they had a buyer. The explanation put forward by this individual to the HDC is very interesting. She said that she could not, that had run into hard times and so on, and that they had a buyer for the property. And the buyer for the property is Miss Juliet Modest, who we know to be now the wife of Minister Cummings. And this is the property that the minister spoke about that is owned by his wife. And HDC asked for all of the documents in relation to this property, and also asked for evaluation reports. Because one of the things that I understand, and I'm subject to correction, but that if you are reselling an HDC property, they will look at the market value, and HDC has the option to repurchase the property and to then give it to someone who is on the waiting list for many years waiting for a property. But HDC gave permission for this to be sold. And this, I have the letter here written by Ms. Salazar, who wrote to the HDC. Said in 2017, when I signed and received my deed, my next step was to get the plans drawn up and approved. I then had to obtain permission. I did this and I received the permission from the building inspector on the 30th of January 2020. By this time, the pandemic had set in and my livelihood was seriously affected. Monies that I would have utilized for construction of the home now went towards rent and other living expenses. It is at this time that I had a discussion with my close relative, Juliet Modest. Miss Modest is like a mother to me. She offered to assist with the financial aspect of completing the construction of the home. I felt that it would only be fair if she were to have legal title to the property, as she would not only bear the cost to complete construction, but in addition, I would be able to live in the house for as long as I wanted. This is the document that HDC disclosed. I didn't obtain this in no mailbox and all that. I got this through the Freedom of Information Act from the HDC. I hope that the above provides clarity as to why construction has not yet been completed. So HDC asked for a valuation report now, and a valuation report was supplied to them. And in the valuation report, of course, you have photos being taken, and the photos, the building wasn't this complete, but the photos show a structure. This valuation report prepared by C.B. Lawrence and Associates says that, and let me go through what they say about the building and so on, and the comments and the valuation opinion. They valued this property at $670,000. Land purchased from the HDC, $51,000 thereabouts. Property value in 2020 when seeking to transfer the land now to the close relative or wife of Minister Cummings, $670,000. That is the open market value. Now, of course, the assessment was based on a number of things, and the property was described and so on. They talk about the property being the amount of the site and so on. The site comprises, they say, more or less flat and irregular in shape. The unfinished 3-level steel structure building. They say the site is to be free and cleared with vacant possession, free from encumbrances. So at the time seeking to transfer this property, there was already on the property a 3-level steel structure building, valued at $670,000. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, you would be interested to know that HDC approved the transfer of this building, and the deed was executed along with permission from the HDC and transferred to Miss Modest for the sum of $100,000. $100,000 was transferred because HDC accepted or the explanations being given. And HDC did this knowing full well that one family, the family acquiring this property was, and I would hope that they would also do their research, was not only the wife of a minister, but that family already owned other HDC properties, because there were other HDC properties repurchased from people in the past and so on, and that they were also the owners of other properties. The companies linked to Minister Cummings and Ms. Modest have also purchased HDC properties. I believe one of the properties in Diego Martin and so on. So we raise all of this to say that there are certainly questions to be asked about the level of oversight from state enterprises, the level of flexibility being given and granted to a particular minister who seems to be building a lot of assets and so on, whether it is in his personal name or in the name of his close family. This is why the Financial Intelligence Unit, when they deal with their rules and their regulations, they deal with not only the individual who is holding public office, but they also have to deal with people who are linked and associated. And I have to say that it is worrisome that a government minister's family can purchase land from the HDC and construct a building looking like this. And will the average citizen be permitted to do this? That is what I want to know. Will the average citizen be given permission to dispose of property for $100,000 when the open market value, according to the valuation that they prepare and submit, is $640,000? Why are these things being allowed to happen at our state enterprises, particularly with the very close and inextricable link to a sitting member of cabinet? So I raise these matters again in the public interest. I give my undertaking to continue my research into what is taking place at many of these state enterprises. Recently, and through the media reports as well, there were issues raised about the number of contracts awarded by the THA to companies linked to this minister. I have sent out a Freedom of Information request to the THA as well to obtain information. And as I said before, I will be continuing on my exploration and my expedition to uncover the truth with Judicot. I want to say today that if I have to go all the way to the Privy Council to get a ruling as to whether or not these checks ought to be disclosed, which will cut to Clyden to see who is the actual recipient of them, I will take it all the way to the Privy Council. I have no qualms about doing that. And of course, I said before, we will be looking through all of these documents that we have received in relation to the dealings with venture credit union and perhaps send them on to the Commissioner for Cooperative Development with the hope that he would exercise, he or she, the office holder, to exercise their discretion. And we certainly, again, repeat the need to remove that office from the purview of Minister Cummings' ministry so that they can exercise their functions properly and in the interest of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I'll hand you over now to Senator Mark because there are a number of other issues that he has to deal with today as well.
Thank you very much, Senator Sen Jayanti. Members of the media, we have heard from our colleague on this particular situation involving the interests that have been negatively impacted upon, that is the people's interest, by the goings on with this particular minister. I would now like to address a couple of matters before we open this media conference to you for any questions you may wish to raise. The citizens of the Caribbean are beginning to ask the question whether there exists prime ministerial terrorism in our Caribbean. Citizens of the Caribbean are concerned and are beginning to question whether there exists prime ministerial terrorism in this Caribbean region. A terror attack was launched, beginning to question, last year, October the 22nd, when an innocent citizen, a law-abiding citizen, was kidnapped, abducted, and forcibly returned to Trinidad and Tobago's soil. With the full cooperation of the police force of Barbados, of which the Prime Minister of Barbados is in charge through the Ministry of National Security. Our information is that the Prime Minister of Barbados is the Minister of National Security in that country. This kidnapping and or abduction silent from the Trinidad and Tobago Minister of National Security, who is appearing to wash his hands of that particular terrorist attack against an innocent citizen. Silence from the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. Silence from the Commissioner of Police. And silence from the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the Prime Minister of Barbados, respectively, Keith Christopher Rowley and Mia Motley. Members of the media, this matter involving Brent Thomas is an extremely serious and grave matter So grave is this matter that in today's newspapers, known or titled Barbados Today, dated Tuesday, May the 2nd, 2023. Look at the headline. The people of Barbados are concerned about this abduction, this kidnapping, with the support of the Barbados Police Service or Force, in the absence of any extradition proceedings. A citizen, a national of Trinidad and Tobago, with the cooperation of the government of Barbados, kidnapped, abducted, and forcibly returned. This citizen to our land, Trinidad and Tobago, which was deemed by a high court judge as illegal and unlawful. This is what appeared in Barbados Today. The Attorney General of Barbados, Dale Marshall, has demanded of the Commissioner of Police, one Commissioner Boyce, a report on this ugly, scandalous, unacceptable, indefensible development involving Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago. Yet, the Prime Minister, who finds time in Toko to attack the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar, leader of the opposition, and quite scandalously attempted to use all kinds of boogeyman in his desperation for relevance in Trinidad and Tobago. He has no time to talk and to investigate this criminal activity that took place on not only the soil of Trinidad and Tobago, but on the soil of Barbados. Here we have the Attorney General of Barbados intervening and calling and demanding for a report from the Commissioner of Police. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what appeared in The Nation, another national newspaper based in Barbados, Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. This is what is happening. So Barbados is concerned about this illegal and unlawful kidnapping and illegal and unlawful abduction of a national by the name of Brent Thomas. And this is another part of the story involving this ugly situation appearing in today's Nation's newspaper. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, today, May the 3rd, Wednesday, May the 3rd, 2023, we demand
from the Prime Minister of Barbados a full statement and an account for this ugly incident involving a national and involving the Barbados police force. There is no time for further silence on this matter. The Prime Minister of Barbados has to speak out and speak up on this matter. We call on Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who is the chairman of the National Security Council. We call on the Prime Minister to break his silence. No Defense Force aircraft could have left Trinidad and Tobago soil and head towards Barbados without the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and his Minister of National Security not knowing. Did the Prime Minister give permission for this aircraft to leave Trinidad and Tobago to kidnap a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago who was in Barbados on his way to Miami for medical attention? The Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley, must account for this invasion and this breach of the citizens' rights. We call on the Attorney General, Reginald Amor, to speak on this issue and to give an account. We are also calling on the Minister of National Security. He is in charge of the Defense Force. And no Defense Force plane could have left here without his knowledge. So he has to give an account for this development. And we need the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs to address this matter, to determine his role, because you cannot have a citizen being forcibly returned to this land without a court order through extradition procedures and proceedings. So the role of the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs is absolutely critical. And the other thing that we want to ask on behalf of the people, is there a secret mongoose gang operating in the police service of Trinidad and Tobago and taking instructions from the Prime Minister and not the Commissioner of Police? Do we have a secret mongoose gang working secretly in the police service and under the direct supervision, direction, and control of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago? How come these police officers who abducted and kidnapped Mr. Brent Thomas unlawfully, illegally, and unconstitutionally, how come they are still on their jobs? How come they are still in the police service? How come they have not been suspended? Commissioner of Police, Erla Christopher Harewood, why are you silent on this matter? We are talking about the violation and the breaching of citizens' constitutional rights that are entrenched in our Constitution. The Commissioner of Police is silent. Well, we are demanding the Commissioner of Police speak and also take action against those rogue police officers who carried out that dastardly act of terrorism against a citizen of our nation, Trinidad and Tobago. I want to put the government on notice that the government has gone too far. They have gone too far. And therefore, we will be considering very seriously writing to the Secretary General of the United Nations on this matter and asking for intervention. We are going to be considering seriously communicating with the European Union on this act of terrorism committed by these two governments. It is the two governments that are involved here. Two of them, the Barbados government and the Trinidad and Tobago government. Both are involved. So we serve notice. The United States government will have to be alerted to this threat to the democracy of TNT by what we have described as prime ministerial terrorism at work in Trinidad and Tobago. So, members of the media, this is one aspect that we will not stop addressing until the criminals are brought to justice in this matter. We will pursue relentlessly this matter until justice is done. So we put all on notice. The other matter I want to deal quickly with has to do with what appeared, I should say, in the Trinidad Guardian of Monday, May the 1st, 2023. And when you read parts of the story that appeared in this Guardian story, this is one. It also appeared in this story in the Newsday on Monday, May the 1st. The headline is, Rowley proposes end to Service Commission. Rowley. And then it also appeared in the Trinidad Daily Express on Monday, the 1st of May. So it was not no mistake. He did not misspeak. He knew what he said. So the newspapers did their duty. They printed what he said in the Express, in the Newsday, and in the Guardian. I would like to deal with the intellectual dishonesty of the Prime Minister's narrative concerning what he has described and his wish to dismantle, in inverted commas, dismantle and abolish the service commissions.
Now, members of the media, before the 1688 revolution in the United Kingdom, the king or the monarch of England used to hire, fire, discipline, promote his subjects who were his servants. I am saying before the 1688 revolution, where the king was overthrown by the people of Britain, the king had the power to hire, to fire, to promote, and to discipline. And they called this, at the time, Jayanti, patronage. Patronage of the king. And the king used patronage in order to win favors and to win votes, so he can win seats in the House of Commons, so he can have control. So when we read the statement from Dr. Rowley that his intention is to dismantle and abolish the service commission, I was a bit taken aback. I was wondering if Dr. Rowley was under the influence of alcohol. I was wondering if Dr. Rowley, at that time, when he spoke for 60 minutes at this family and sports day, whether he was stable. Because that cannot be coming from the mind of a prime minister. Listen, members of the media, you see this document here? This is our constitution. You do not go to a family and sport day and commit what I call, Jayanti, sacrilege. This is sacred space. This is a sacred document. You did not choose to come to the parliament to tell us what your plans are for the service commissions. You did not choose to say it in an address to the nation from Whitehall. You know what you decide to do? When your people, your supporters, your sycophants, the fanatical bunch that went to the sport and family day, you choose when people were having fun to touch, to interfere, and to threaten sacrilege against the Constitution and the institutions under our Constitution. Members of the media, it was in 1928, under the British colonial rule, that we had established in this country something called the Civil Service Selection Board. The Civil Service Selection Board of 1928. That was almost 95 years ago. Almost a century. And that board was established by the British to promote, to appoint, to discipline, and to transfer civil servants within the colonial structure at that time, small as it may have been. In 1936, it was changed from the Civil Service Selection Board to the Civil Service Committee. Service Committee. The Civil Service Committee. That was in 19 1936. I don't think Rowley was born. And then come in 1959, when Eric Williams arrived on the scene in 1955. Between 56 and 61, Eric Williams was the chief minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Because we were still under colonial rule, there was an election in 1956. He won the election and he became chief minister. You know what Eric Williams did? Eric Williams established the Public Service Commission in 1959. Eric Williams established the Public Service Commission in 1959, replacing the Civil Service Selection or Service Committee, which came into being in 1936. Eric Williams, the father of the PNM, placed into our Constitution of 1962 the following service commissions: the Public Service Commission, the Police Service Commission, and the Judicial and Legal Service Commission. Members of the media, in 1968, Eric Williams amended the Constitution and inserted the Teaching Service Commission. So by 1968, 6 years after independence, we had 4 service commissions, all entrenched in our Constitution. I made the point about intellectual dishonesty. And what do I mean? Members of the media, Eric Williams promoted service commissions. Eric Williams defended service commission. Eric Williams wanted service commissions to be a buffer between the politician and the public officer or the public servant. And that was the purpose of these service commissions, to establish impartiality, political neutrality, to ensure that there is fairness and justice for these public officers. Not like the king, not like the monarch before the revolution of 1688. Come it, you come. Go it, you go. I can hire you, I can fire you. I can discipline you, I can transfer you. That is what existed before the revolution in the United Kingdom in 1688. And what do we have now? We have a clear attempt by the Prime Minister to mislead the population. You know, in this article here, in the Newsday, you know what this man said? He said, all over the Commonwealth, they are abolishing service commission. So what do we? You hear lie? You hear lie? All over the Commonwealth, there are, I want to repeat, all over the Commonwealth, there are service commissions, starting from the motherland, the United Kingdom. There are service commissions in the United Kingdom, appointing judges, appointing civil servants. There are service commissions in Australia, in India. There are service commissions in Jamaica and Barbados. Why would a Prime Minister want to engage in such unhealthy communication? Why would a Prime Minister want to tell Trinidad and Tobago that all Commonwealth countries have done away with service commission and he doesn't know what is wrong with us? Lie! That is not true. Let Rowley identify one country in the Commonwealth that doesn't have a service commission. So why lie to the people? for your own selfish political ambitions? That is the reason? Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot blame the Public Service Commission for poor services or for poor delivery of services, because he claims the management tenets are not entrenched and enshrined in these service commissions. Hence the reason we don't have proper services being delivered to the people. How is that possible? That cannot be possible. I know why it cannot be possible. Members of the media, these service commissions are not employers of public officers. These service commissions are not employers of public officers. The government employs public officers. The government set terms and conditions for public officers, be they police officers, be they civil servants, be they prison officers, be they fire officers. It is the government. The government is the employer through the CPO, called the personnel department. And it is important to note that the minister under the Constitution is the person with responsibility for the general direction and control of his ministry. So the minister has a very important role in the managerial functions of the ministry or of his ministry. So you can't blame the public service commissions or service commissions for poor services and for managerial issues. You're being intellectually dishonest as a prime minister. You cannot blame the service commissions for what you are blaming them for. It is not their role and functions. The responsibility lies with you, Prime Minister, and your government. Your government is the problem, not the service commissions. Your government is the employer, not the service commission. Why do you think permanent secretaries are appointed? In this constitution, the permanent secretaries are the supervisors/managers. They manage on behalf of the government through a minister who has direct control over his ministry, not the Public Service Commission. And by the way, the Prime Minister says he wants to abolish and dismantle our Service Commission. The Public Service Commission appoints police, prison officers, civil servants, firefighters. That's the Public Service Commission. The Teaching Service Commission appoints teachers, principals. The Judicial and Legal Service Commission, they appoint judges and magistrates. And legal officers at state institutions like the Director of Public Prosecution's Office. So if the government, if the Prime Minister is going to abolish by I laugh. I had to take a pause. He said by 2024, this man has to be an inebriate. He said by 2024, he is going to abolish all the service commissions and establish a tribunal. Who will appoint the tribunal? Will it be the Prime Minister? Look, members of the media, the Service Commission is sacred space. These are sacred spaces in our Constitution. If the Prime Minister is interested in constitutional reform, set up an independent Constitution Reform Commission
with outstanding citizens independent of the government. And let us do what is called a constitutional relook. Because we want electoral reform, you know. We want a mix of the first past the post and proportional representation. That will avoid house padding that you are now doing. Prime Minister, you are house padding to vote a pad, to thief the next general election. We want constitutional reform too. We want proportional representation along with a mixed first past the post system as was proposed by the Hugh Wooden Commission of 1974. So members of the media, I want to say in closing, to change, to abolish, to dismantle our service commissions requires 2/3 majority. I want to tell Dr. Rowley, he might pass. I don't wish him to pass. I want to wish him long health, long life. But I want to give him the assurance and the commitment on behalf of the United National Congress. Just as how you will never be allowed to abolish the Privy Council, to impose the CCJ on our country. We want to give the country, we want to give all public officers, all police officers, all firefighters, all prison officers, all civil servants, judges, magistrates, legal officers. We want to give you the undertaking today that under the United National Congress, there will be no support whatsoever for the abolition and the dismantling of our service commissions in Trinidad and Tobago. We want to give you the assurance. Do not lose sleep. Continue doing your business. Ignore the Prime Minister. He might have wanted to go on a distraction, use this as a distraction. Maybe he wanted to do that. But we give you the assurance that we will not betray you. The only abolition that people want in this country is the abolition of the PNM. The only dismantling that people want in Trinidad and Tobago is the dismantling of this criminal, kleptocratic enterprise led by Alibaba. That is what people want. They want a dismantling of the PNM, an abolition of the PNM, not our service commissions. So at this time, I will pause, and any questions you would like to pose to us, we are willing to address your concerns. Thank you very much, members of the media.
We have some questions, Senator. First of all, to Ms. Senator Media. Mr. Cummings is insisting that he has broken no law. Do you think that despite these revelations, how do you respond to that?
So, as I said during the press conference, there are laws in place, but there are also practices and procedures at state organizations. There are practices and procedures applicable to banks, and they are put there in place to ensure that persons are not engaging in illegal activity. If these practices and procedures are not being adhered to, for example, there is some allowance being given for the commingling of funds, is there something deeper that the authorities need to investigate? It may not be illegal for a minister to use ministerial influence, for example, to get contracts, but that is something that, has to be looked at, and the population must decide. I want to draw your attention to some of the questions that were replicated in the article today to the Bankers Association. And, it talked about the lending of monies and how it's done and so on. And about the separate identities of individuals and companies. Now, if there are rules like this in place in relation to banks, and the average person going to a bank cannot get that type of facility, but it's being extended by a credit union, has the credit union broken a law? Perhaps not, but perhaps they found a workaround. But is the exposure, and that's the question I raised today, is the exposure of the credit union, and should be of a concern to its members when this type of information is put out there? Utilizing individuals or corporate structures to gain a personal benefit may not be against the law per se, but it may have other, it may be that if somebody follows the money and see that there's personal enrichment of a minister and his family, that is certainly something that may be looked at. It may be a breach of the Integrity in Public Life Act. It may be a breach of certain financial rules and regulations. We have something called the Financial Obligations Regulations, with certain amounts of declarations. That's why every time you go to the bank, if you are a relative of a minister or an MP or a senator, even we have to abide by those things. We have to fill out a lot of paperwork. The bank is required to collect that type of information and data. What is happening here, it seems that there's a lot of flexibility. There's the use of corporate structures to disguise transactions, and we are saying that the money has to be followed, and clearly there's something to be investigated because there is an ongoing investigation.
Senator, you also mentioned the special branch report that you raised last year. At the time, the Prime Minister said that a special branch report is itself not evidence of a crime. Given the latest revelations by Marcus, do you think the Prime Minister should perhaps reevaluate the situation?
Well, the Prime Minister is playing smart with foolishness as usual when he made that statement, because as he's aware, the special branch is the intelligence gathering arm of the DTPS. So what they do is they gather intelligence, which upon investigation can be converted into evidence. What did the intelligence report say? The intelligence report named companies, for example, like the one I mentioned today called Clydon. A simple investigation into the contracts being awarded to Clydon may reveal the connections which I have brought here today. So we are now bringing evidence of very close connections, since the Prime Minister wasn't interested enough to look into it. We are bringing evidence of a very close connection between this company called Clydon and the minister. We are bringing, and his companies, his family companies. We are bringing the evidence, for example, of the amount of work being given, $19 million over a period from when a company started in 2015 by a former company secretary of the minister's family company, is something that is perhaps a red flag. And when you look at it, and then more than anything else, I am raising the issue of who is being paid when these checks are being cut to Clydon. So there may be further evidence. Perhaps they're refusing it to give it to me under freedom of information, but should the TTPS, should the police, and I would ask the TTPS to go to UDCOT and look for those checks being paid to Clydon and go to every state enterprise that awards contracts to these companies. In fact, every single state enterprise should be asked to disclose whether or not they have been taking, allowing contracts to be assigned, and whether they have been, in fact, issuing checks directly to Venture Credit Union, because we don't even know there are other companies that are obtaining funding in a similar way and are assigning checks to Venture Credit Union. At the end of the day, from every single state enterprise, MTS, AGC, UDCOT, even the THA, every single one of them, CPEP, everybody should disclose whether or not, since 2015, they have been issuing checks directly to Venture Credit Union, and for how much. And that information ought to be made public.
Well, on that point, we know the government has passed the procurement legislation. Are there elements in the procurement legislation that would hold some of these companies?
Well, the procurement legislation really deals with how contracts are awarded and so on. So it will bring some change to the manner in which work is done. It would have a procurement regulator who can look over, for example, the award of contracts. So when you have a contract that is a company that suddenly comes into existence and all of a sudden is awarded a large sum of work, we don't know what their track record may be, etc., etc. Those are things that the procurement regulator will be able to look at. One of the things that troubled me with some of the information that came out there is really the fact of this thing called emergency work, because you are able to bypass, I understand, certain tendering processes and procedures when something is on an emergency basis and you can award it to a specific company. Again, are state enterprises allowing things to become so critical? Because some of this work was in relation to a school in Hoover where there had been issues reported for many, many, many months, and then suddenly it is treated as emergency work and the contract being awarded to a particular company. Now, is that a way of getting around tendering processes and procedures? I don't know, but we definitely have to look at the way that state enterprises are awarding contracts. What are their tendering processes and procedures? And again, the procurement legislation that was passed is a watered down version. What was finally proclaimed was that they spent 8 years basically cherry picking parts of it out, watering it down, and so it certainly deprives the population of the original strong and robust regime that the UNC envisioned and that the UNC came up with and passed after many, many years and months of consultation with all of the respective stakeholders. So it is a watered down version, but certainly with respect to tendering procedures, we expect that when a procurement regulator is finally appointed, that we hope that this person will have a little more oversight into the award of contracts, and also that an avenue for complaint by persons who are aggrieved by decisions to award contracts, they will have an avenue of complaint through the Office of the Procurement Regulator.
Sentiment regarding Brent Thomas affair. As you indicated, the Attorney General of Barbados has asked for an explanation as to how this happened. Our own Attorney General, A.G. Amor, has made no statement on this issue so far. Are you concerned about that no one in government has come forward to explain how this incident has occurred?
Yeah, I think that the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago ought to be extremely concerned and alarmed over the continued deafening silence on the part of the Prime Minister and the Attorney General in particular. Now, this is a very serious issue. If you looked at and read the 97-page judgment of the very distinguished judge in this matter, it reveals so many chilling developments that any ordinary, well-informed citizen is well advised to at least acquaint yourself with the contents of that report. And that is why I say it against the background of the question that you have asked. Why has the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs not make a statement on this development? So I would agree that it is passing strange where a citizen's rights have been completely breached and violated, and the Attorney General is supposed to be the guardian of our Constitution, and he has remained silent. So yes, I believe that the time has come for the Attorney General to at least follow in the footsteps of his Barbadian counterpart, with the Honorable Dale Marshall, to demand a report on this whole ugly episode that is now haunting our nation.
With regards to the Service Commission, we saw the controversial manner in which the Lassie Prasad Police Service Commission collapsed. There are still answers as to how that scenario unfolded with regards to the Police Service Commission's merit list. Are you concerned with the new proposal by the Prime Minister that positions like the Commissioner of Police will now come under the direct control of the Prime Minister?
Well, but we do not support any shift in that particular arena whatsoever. we are of the firm view that the Police Service Commission, the Public Service Commission, the Teaching Service Commission, and the Judicial and Legal Service Commission should remain independent institutions and commissions under our Constitution. So in that regard, that criminal violation of our Constitution by the Prime Minister, when he disrupted and interrupted the flow of the merit list from the office of the chairman to the president, and then via the president to the parliament, that interruption by our Prime Minister is a criminal matter. And also the last president, Paula May Weeks, have a lot to answer, because there is where our so-called separation of powers become almost non-existent. So we are very clear that the Police Service Commission must continue to have its independence, even though we are conscious and steps will be taken to address those deficiencies, as we have witnessed in the matter involving Bliss C. Prasad, the president, former president of the country, Paula May Weeks, and the Prime Minister. We are conscious of it. We know what happened. That is why the former Prime Minister, current leader of the opposition, triggered the particular section of the Constitution to have a tribunal investigate into the conduct of the former president of Trinidad and Tobago. So there are institutions established under our Constitution to avoid what we have experienced and the question that you have asked. Before continue,
those are all the questions we have.
Members of the media, before you close, I want to ask a question. Before you close, citizens are asking whether the police should not investigate and interview the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister of our country. People are asking his utterances at the Sport and Family Day have generated a lot of concerns. And people are asking whether the Prime Minister is not facilitating and promoting racial strife in our country by his reckless and irresponsible conduct, which is almost bordering on sedition and incitement to racial disharmony in our nation, and whether the police commissioner should not be looking at the Sedition Act to determine if the Prime Minister has breached the Sedition Act by his reckless and irresponsible race-baiting statement that he made at the Sport and Family Day of the PNM last Sunday in Togo. That is what people are asking. And Commissioner of Police, earlier Hereward Christopher, the people are asking you to examine very carefully those reckless and irresponsible statements made by the Prime Minister last Sunday, and whether the Sedition Act was not breached and violated. And if it was, take action. Thank you very much, members of the media. If there are no further questions from the members of the media, on behalf of my colleague, Senator the Honorable Jayanti Lakshmidial, and myself,
and on behalf of the leadership of our party, led by the distinguished Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa, we would like to thank members of the media for taking time off to come to the office of the leader of the opposition within a period of 48 hours to attend to 2 press conferences because of the severity and seriousness of the moment. So we want to thank members of the media for being here today, and we look forward to meeting with members of the media on Sunday when we host our Sunday weekly press conference, and of course to be followed on Monday, that is the following Monday, but when we have our annual weekly report of the United National Congress. So thank you so very much, members of the media. Good afternoon, and do reach to your respective destinations safely. Thank you.